Wonderful. Well, let's get started. All right. So, for the first question, I always love to ask just to get us started. Um, and especially since we've talked already, and you have said that you've had a long journey. So, if you can go back to that place when you were younger, and this whole journey is about to start for you. When did you find out that you had infertility, or that you were having issues getting pregnant?
For me, it was about like somewhere between 12 and 18 months after I got married. So we got married in the summer of 2010. And about a year in, I was like, hey, like, why aren't we getting pregnant? And for some reason, I wasn't stressed about it. I know for some women, like 3 months in, even six, even like definitely 12, they get very frustrated. But part of it is I wasn't like tracking my cycles or really actively trying until I'd say about 12 to 18 months, somewhere in there. So once I started learning about fertility, that's when I became worried because I realized, like, oh, this should have happened by now, and it's not. So that's definitely somewhere in the 18th month is when I sought medical care, and I just started with an OBGYN and said, I'm not pregnant. I've been married for over a year. So they did some basic workup on me, like they call it, I think, an HSG. So
Yeah.
let's check to see if your tubes are clear. Let's have, your husband do a semen analysis. She checked my estrogen, just some basic stuff. So somewhere around there is really when it got started, like when I knew I had a problem.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I remember all that stuff, and having to get the routine stuff done, and at the beginning, gosh, it feels like it just takes forever. But it's also very necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Very good. Yeah. So you're seeing a gynecologist. What all do they do?
They did, and I think it's called FSH test. Like I think
Okay.
you have to get between a seven
Oh,
or
yes.
under,
Yeah.
to check your egg health, or like, are you going into early menopause? So that checked out okay. No
Okay.
red flags for a while there. That made it challenging because I basically got put into the unexplained category.
Yeah.
She said at this point you should see a reproductive specialist, and so she recommended I do that. I think
Okay.
it took me, at that point, it was about 18 months to the 2 year mark. At the
Okay.
time, I decided to wait until like the new year came, and then I was like, okay, we'll go see a fertility specialist. So we did that about 3 years in, close to 3 years after being married. And that was basic. She said, let's do a Clomid cycle, let's do a letrozole cycle. And then when that didn't work, let's do an IUI. And then that didn't work. And then I switched my insurance and did an IUI at Kaiser. And then Kaiser said, let's do a laparoscopy. Maybe you have endometriosis. And they did it. I did not. The only finding at that time is she said, you have a lot of fluid in your pelvic region.
Hmm.
And when we see a lot of fluid, we almost suspect it's a woman that has had multiple pregnancies,
Hmm.
which I thought was very strange, right? Because I said, well, I've never been pregnant. So she said, the fluid is a concern in your pelvic area. After that, I went to a naturopathic doctor and I went to an acupuncturist. So I went like the whole Chinese medicine natural route. Let me try that out.
Yeah.
um, that helped me find more information, which was great. Like I will say, the naturopathic ran a very detailed hormonal panel on me, and he said, I see signs of like PCOS or like hormonal imbalance. So that was really helpful. I gave that a good 6 months of like, okay, I'm gonna do this whole natural thing. I'm gonna change my diet. I'm gonna drink bone broth. See what happens. And
It's
then
worth
when
a shot.
yeah, and then when that didn't happen, I mean, we're talking like I think it was 2016, and I was like 5.5 to 6 years in
Wow.
of like, this is not working. This is not happening. At the time, I happened to be in graduate school. I was pursuing a
Hmm.
master's in public administration. So that added another challenge for me, anyhow. Starting IVF when I was trying to finish that program seemed overwhelming and daunting. So then I decided, as soon as I wrap up this degree, we're going to go in and pursue IVF because we think there's no other way. I will say it took some time for my husband to be on the same page as me. I was ready to like go gung ho, 3 years in. Like, I'm tired of this. I just want a baby. I think the third year was the hardest for me. And for him, it took some time. Like, when his brother was going to have a baby, I think that is what really turned his opinion. Like, okay, I hate this. I want to be a dad. This is not fair. So at the time when we had that conversation, I said, I'm about to finish my master's program, so can we wait until the year starts? As soon as I'm done, we will do this. So that was at the end of 2016 when I finished my master's program, and we started like right in January of 2017. So we went with it. My first egg retrieval got kind of interrupted because I had like a lead follicle, so that caused a disruption. I don't know if you've heard of that, but they said, oh, well, let's put you on birth control next time so that they grow at the same rate.
Oh, I see. So lead
Yeah.
follicle means like you
Yeah.
just got one that's leading.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. And
So
big.
January
Okay.
comes, basically, I was supposed to have my egg retrieval somewhere at the middle end of January, but I had to start over.
Oh, wow.
It was hard. It was hard because I had already spent $1,000 worth of injectable medication.
And you're already taking it,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Oof.
As we know, like, injectable drugs, if you don't have insurance coverage, are outrageous.
Yes.
They tend to be the most expensive part, and then the doctor's fee and the retrieval and all of that. So that was frustrating, but I said, okay, I was not meant to have an egg retrieval at the end of January. And we just went with it, ended up having an egg retrieval at the end of March. So that was that disruption. Um, I did Invocell. To clarify, it's a type of IVF that is handled differently. It's not. It's very similar, but they don't take the eggs and watch them or observe them in the lab. They go into a little capsule. They put it inside my uterus or my
Yeah.
cervix, I believe. It doesn't go all the way in the uterus, and then they revisit and check the embryos about 3 days in. So that was an
Hmm.
interesting process.
For
Um,
sure.
I started with 11 eggs, and then like 7 were mature, and they all fertilized as far as I recall. But at the end of all said and done, I ended up with 3.
Okay.
So 3 days after retrieval, they transferred 2 embryos, and the doctor told me that day, I'm going to transfer 2. So it caught me off guard because I said I must have an egg quality issue. Like, we never talked about doing 2, and so it puzzled me at the time. And I said, why are we doing 2? Like, I don't want to have twins.
Yeah.
But he was giving his medical advice, and I said, okay, I'm trusting you. Um,
How old are you at this time?
I am 37.
Okay. I'm sorry.
At the
Then when
time,
you did it.
at
Uh-huh.
the time when I did it, I believe I was 34.
34. Okay. And your husband's around the similar age?
Yes, we're just a month apart.
Okay.
So we're close
Okay.
in age. So yes, that was strange. He wanted to transfer 2.
Uh,
I ended up miscarrying those embryos.
mm,
It was really hard because
sorry.
I'd never seen 2 pink lines, and we were so excited, and we thought like this is it.
Yeah.
And then we miscarried. It was like a blighted ovum type of
Hmm.
situation. So it kind of dragged out. My body was not miscarrying naturally. And I ended up having a DNC in the middle of May.
Mm.
So I recall I saw the 2 lines I saw around April 7th. And then it was beta hell and all the things that come with, like,
Yeah.
after you get pregnant. So that was a complete nightmare. But I had the DNC around May, like mid-May. So after that, it actually took quite a bit to do the next transfer for a couple reasons. I was like emotionally burnt out. from the IVF, all of it, the miscarriage. And I know it was really hard on my husband too. So it was hard on both of us. So somewhere in the summer, we decided to just kind of take a vacation. We wanted to put it on the back burner for a bit. We only had one frozen embryo, so that was a lot of pressure. Wondering if that was going to work or not. So we did a vacation, all inclusive. Went to Mexico, had a great time, and we got back. And I said, okay, the next time my cycle starts, like we will start our frozen embryo transfer cycle and see what happens. So we did that in August. It got started, did all the medications, all the things. And then they transferred my embryo on September 1st. And I got a positive pregnancy test on September 5th. And I know I tested early. Don't judge me. I tested really early, which I shouldn't have done, but I did it. And
I get it.
we're really lucky. Like it worked out. I had a baby boy in May. And I just think it's really special that his due date was just a couple days after my miscarriage the previous year. So I just felt like that was God's plan. Like he was meant to be born in May. You know, very grateful for our son.
I bet. Wow. And so much pressure, like you said, with just that one left over, you don't know what's going to happen. It's hard.
It was a lot of pressure. And I mean, I'm just so thankful because I could have had like zero chances, you know?
Right.
Very
Right.
And even now, I've dealt with like secondary infertility since he was about, since he was about one, because I had a cesarean, which was like another surprise. That was hard.
Me too.
To like, that's the only thing I didn't prepare for. You know, like I did the labor class, and I
yeah.
I prepared for everything but that. So that's just life, you know. I wasn't prepared for that. But because I did that, I knew for my body it was safe to wait. If I got pregnant soon after he was born, you know, like rupture is a risk and so many things. Like I knew that my body needed about a year. That was the best thing I could do. So I wasn't actively trying until about a year after he was born.
Okay.
And you know, that hasn't been successful. And my husband both feel at peace with not pursuing IVF again. It's a personal decision. I don't judge any woman that wants to, I won't say wants to, but pursues that as many times as they feel they can. For us, it just hasn't felt like the answer for some reason. Just
I
like
totally get that.
haven't been there, and you know, I trust God's plan, and I just haven't been willing to go there. But yeah, that's kind of where we are. You know, we kind of taken time to come to terms with like we may be a family of three, and that's okay. I'm thankful for that. I know there are a lot
Exactly.
of women that like are waiting for that the one baby, you know, to hold a baby in real life. It just means a lot to us.
For sure. And that's the thing. It's like, who says you have to have more than one child? If your family, you guys are okay and you feel at peace, like you said, with one, then that's fine.
Yes.
There's always so much pressure no matter what. When are you gonna have
Yeah.
a baby? And then when are you
It
gonna
is
give them a
pressure.
sibling? And it's
Yeah.
always something.
And I will say for women dealing with secondary infertility, it doesn't mean that like I sympathize with those women and I it's a process of grief and I still go through grief every day. So I will say it's not something where I'm like, oh, you should be grateful that you have one.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. When I say that, it's just something that I think it took me like a good solid year to get through the grief part. Like, oh, like my son might not have a sibling. That makes me so sad for him. And we've talked about adoption as well. And I still have hope like that my husband will be on the same page with me on that, or like fostering, or you know, like I definitely have a desire to grow our family, but I'm also balancing that with like the gratitude and the peace with, you know, that if it's meant to be, it's going to happen.
For sure. I 100% wholeheartedly agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, you and I were, wait, I think I just turned 38. Never mind. It's like you get up, you start getting
I'm
up there.
actually going to be 38 this year, so you
Yeah.
know we're pretty
So
close in age.
we're close in age, and yeah, I think about that too with having one. I'm like, well, yeah, I would like to have another one. But there's that in the back of my mind that says, okay, well, but if it doesn't happen, then we're gonna have to be okay with that. So I totally understand. So through your journey, you sought out a few different reproductive endocrinologists.
Yeah.
Um, why did you end up, you said you had seen three. So what was it about the first one? What was it about the second one that didn't really sit well with you that caused you to go to the last one?
Okay, I'm gonna think of where I started. So for one, I live in a county where I don't have I didn't have a choice in my county. That was
Okay.
changing. I think I went to the only possible in my county, and we had the consult, and we didn't click with the doctor because she spent the entire consult telling us all the reasons that like fertility doesn't happen for couples, or she even went to say, without really understanding my medical background, saying, I think you're going to go through early menopause. I said, why? Because I had spent so much time looking at every single test that I had done and like reading into it, researching it, google.com madness. So I didn't really know where that was coming from. And ultimately, we felt that, she was going to make over $20,000 on our IVF, and she wasn't giving me that advice from like a genuine place. That's just how we felt, and my husband and I agreed wholeheartedly. So I said, "Oh, well, what are we going to do now? Because we don't have something close to us." So we ended up finding a new clinic about 45 minutes from where we live, and I didn't have any major red flags at that particular clinic as far as doing like the IVF, but I think what happened is when I had the first or second IUI, I felt burnt out. Like I just couldn't handle it. It was hard. It was like starting with the Clomid cycles, and we tried letrozole, then we tried IUI. So then with my job, I switched to Kaiser Insurance, and that put me in a different world. Like, oh well, now you can see this doctor, and you're gonna have to drive to further than before, like an hour before that it compared to the last clinic. So it was really just an insurance change at that point. It was not anything majorly wrong with the clinic. So then it was that plan. Um, that's where I did the laparoscopy. And I'm not when they discovered that fluid in my pelvic region, I started reading about it, learning about it, and that's kind of what led me to I want to go to a naturopathic doctor, and I want to do the Chinese medicine and all the natural things. So that's kind of how that happened. Ultimately, I went to the final doctor because they were the only clinic that did Invocell, and Invocell was going to save me like between $5,000 and $8,000. So
Okay.
that's really what sold me. I said, okay, that's a 45-minute drive. I'm going to make this happen. I would drive to the clinic at like 6:30 in the morning. I'd get there at 7:30. They would do my like blood checks, my ultrasounds, baselines. I do all that early in the morning. So I made it work to save some money.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find InfoCell so fascinating. I mean, all of it, IVF, everything's fascinating, but it's really cool. So
Yeah.
you can't do ICSI with InfoCell, right?
You cannot. No.
Okay. So if it's like a male factor, then it's
Yeah.
best to do. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
My rationale for InfoCell is when they're observing your embryos from the get go, they can't really intervene to choose a winner, right? So I
Yeah.
wish that was the case. So what it does is it doesn't allow you to know what's happening as the days progress. You're just going to find out day 3. This is where you're at. So in my mind, I knew that by doing Invocell, the only thing I was taking away from my situation is not being able to assess how embryos were doing on day 2. And like until they were retrieved and looked at and observed again, I realized like whatever happens between day 1 and day 3, I can't change it. I can't say like don't lose us, don't leave us.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I thought, you know what, Invocell is not a bad thing.
No.
Aside from
Yeah.
not, like you're saying, not being able to do ICSI, I felt like there's really no reason to not pursue it compared to the standard IVF.
Yeah. Yeah. And it saves money. That's great.
Yes, yes. But you're right. We wouldn't have been able to test them unless like you had them frozen and then thawed, send them to the lab, and then, that's the only
Yeah.
way we would have been able to do genetic testing.
Okay. Okay.
Which
So,
reminds me that at some point we saw a genetic counselor. So there's so much in my medical journey, but after seeing the first doctor, she thought I had something going on with genes. It was like elevated 17-OH progesterone. So I had to investigate that. I went to a genetics counselor, and we didn't find anything significant with that. So we were kind of confident in the genetic stuff. We both got genetic testing.
So the hormonal imbalance, what was it looking like? Was it like you had just mentioned, was it just too much estrogen? Was it too much testosterone? Okay.
It was too much estrogen, and then there were some androgens that were elevated. It wasn't testosterone, it was something called DHEAS. That was the hormone that was elevated. And I had slightly high AMH, which sometimes you're like, that's a good thing because you've got plenty of eggs. But then it also kind of indicates like there are too many small like follicles. They're not eggs, follicles. So those were kind of the things that didn't look right in my history.
I see. And so what caused the fluid? Did you find that out?
Never did. Never did. And it's been an ongoing problem. Like my whole pelvic region just gets like, it becomes inflamed or just doesn't, it's not comfortable. So
Wow.
I think that's ultimately something I will live with. There's no way to fix it.
So even with all of that, you still were given the unexplained infertility diagnosis?
Yes. So by a reproductive specialist, they put me in that category. However, the naturopathic doctor, I sided with him. I felt like he had nailed it. It's like, well, you found something, like if someone can get pregnant for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, there's something going on.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's not just for nothing.
Women or couples are given unexplained all the time. It just means the doctor didn't figure out what was happening with you.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
They just couldn't figure it out.
Yep. I mean, I get it. Every time I would go to the doctor in different ones, and they would all say, "Oh, your tests look great. Your numbers look fine. Physically, nothing looks wrong. I can't see why you can't get pregnant." But I never could.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So going back, if you could go to your younger self before you started this journey and can tell that woman something before starting the journey that maybe would have helped along the journey, is there anything that comes to mind?
There is. So I'm pretty forgiving of myself because I would say, like, follow your heart in your own journey. It's not easy. Infertility is full of like grief, sadness, disappointment, all kinds of emotions. So I would say if I could have started the whole medical journey faster, of course, I know that would have been the smart thing to do, especially in the sense that once I had my son, if I got to that point a bit younger, maybe I would have had the energy to like grow my family and do it all over again and all that. So of course I wish I could have started a little bit earlier, but I will say that with marriage, like husband and wife have to be on the same page. So that's really important. You should never force each other or make each other feel guilty because like, oh well, you weren't ready and I was ready, and marriage is tough. So I definitely think that ultimately we made the right decisions for us, and it got us where we are, and we're super thankful. And I wholeheartedly feel it was like what was meant to happen, like that the timing, God's timing. But yes, I do kind of kick myself like, hey, why didn't you do that sooner? Why did you wait 18 months to even like open that can of worms? Like let me go see a doctor. I wish I'd gone a little bit sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that. For anybody who's watching this and who finds out that they have infertility and they are on this journey that they didn't ask for, is there anything that you would like to tell that person before, going in, whether it's emotional or mental, um, something that could help them along the way?
I would tell them that the sooner you kind of try to come to terms with like infertility is hard. It's a journey of grief. Um, Even when you're waiting for that baby, you miss a baby that you haven't met yet. Like it's full of grief. Like you think about that baby all the time. So I would just tell them to just give themselves a lot of grace with that, because when you turn your back to that and you say, this isn't going to ruin me, this, like, if you don't accept that it's a hard journey, it's just that much harder. So, kind of coming from a self care perspective, is facing that if you can, as best as you can, saying, I know this is hard. When you don't do that, you can't work on that, is kind of what I'm trying to get at. So,
Yeah.
if you really think about that early enough, you'll say, this is what I'm going to have to do to face this ugly situation. That's
Yeah.
really my only advice for women, is like, be kind to yourself. I think infertility has taught me a different angle of empathy than I had before. Like, I think I just can relate to people's lives better, even if they're going through something that I haven't gone through. My empathy is just like way different, and I'm really grateful for that.
That's great, and that's huge. I'm not sure I've heard anybody say that, but I thought the same thing, and I'm sure anybody who listens to this and who's gone through infertility long enough can also just agree with that too. Because going before my journey, I considered myself to be like, I needed more compassion in the beginning. Like when I was younger, I would tell my husband Mondo, I'm like, man, I just feel like I need more compassion in life and more empathy. And it's just so funny how things happen like that. And there are things that happen in life that cause pain and grief
Mhm.
and are hard to accept. But like to hear you say you're thankful for that, I'm thankful for that too, because it actually has caused me to be a better person,
Mhm.
and in the end, a better wife, a better mother,
Yep.
and a better friend. So yeah, I totally got you on that. I think when it takes somebody going through something very, very hard, you can't help but just to have this type of empathy towards and compassion towards people that you didn't have before.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I agree. I would say, infertility and then actually having my son, like becoming a mom, those two things have just done miracles on me, and it changed me. I'm just not the same person. So those
Yeah,
two journeys alone just really have made an impact for me.
that's good. That's so good. Thank you. Thank you again for sharing your story.
Yes. Well, thank you for doing this. This is awesome.
Yes, yes, I'm so glad to.